röra lite. Så. Ja, bra. Tack. Nej, jag tycker du ska sitta här. Då känner jag mig mindre nervös. Det ska bli så kul att höra det. Ja, tack. Det var så... Ja, det var väldigt kul att få bara tänka igenom inför det här. Sen, ja, tråkigt nog ska man helst köra en föreläsning 3 gånger och repa den 5 gånger och sen... Så nu är det lite försökskaniner. Det här är min första, jag har gjort om min hel. Ja. Och du pratar klockan efter, va? På förmiddagen? Ja, toppen. Härligt. Alltså, ja, tack. Ja, men då kommer jag att göra likewise när jag har hört det antagligen.
Hello everybody and welcome to SICS Open House. This is a great day. It's like a party. I mean, enormous sound. It's a lot of people and we are a bit nervous what will happen with this party, but it's a big day for SICS today. And it's a big day because we have the opportunity to show you all of our research and startups, etc. we are involved in and all the collaborations we're involved in. So it's a really, really great day. We will now have some presentations and afterwards it will be an exhibition on the 6th floor and there will also be food during lunch. I will start with giving some background what's happening around SICS. First of all, SICS is growing quite rapidly right now. So we're starting up offices in many places in Sweden. Right now we are here in Kista, of course. We are in Västerås, we are in Norrköping, we are in Linköping, we are in Lund, and we are even in Uppsala and Luleå. And I hope I didn't miss anyone. And last week we had an inauguration of a data center test suite in Luleå. So it's really into the data center now to also strengthen Swedish competition in getting investment of new data centers. So data is important and I think all of you know that and it's getting more and more important. What we are working in with respect to data is of course analysis, data analytics, big data analytics, AI, have a lot of names. And this is growing quite rapidly and we have a lot of demands on helping different companies and collaboration projects, etc. We also see a lot into different areas now. Automotive is exploding, automation, of course, IT is continuing to develop, etc. And healthcare, a lot of things happening there. And that's what we see right now is digitalization. And what we see is that 4 or 5 years ago, our collaboration partners was always high-tech industry. What we see today, we see totally new collaborations. It's bank, insurances, it's furniture companies, it's real estate companies, and that's because digitalization is so important in the business. So things happening. What do we see in the future? We see quite a lot in the future, of course. But one of the big things happening right now, we see, I talked about that, analytics, and I think it's very rapidly moving to artificial intelligence. And it sounds very like AI, what is that? But we will see AI as support tools, which in a way will be invisible, but that will increase very rapidly in the future. But it will start out in different verticals. It will not be this kind of super assistant that assists in everything. It will be in specific areas. And still, I mean, AI is happening right now. It's a lot of buzz regarding deep learning, etc., and some applications. But that is, I would say, is the first step now. it's moving rapidly. So talk with our AI guys to see what they think. We see security is getting more and more important all the time. We see how to build complex system. The system gets more and more complex, and they're integrated over a lot of different technologies, etc. We see also, of course, this integrity and privacy issues coming more and more and getting more and more important because it really affects our lives. So I think that is also an area that is extremely important in the future. Okay, a lot of things happening right now, but remember, this is the speed right now, as one of my colleagues, Leonard, say, the speed now is very high, and it will become higher. That is the challenge we have, all of us sitting here. Now I've almost covered all my points here. So now I'm coming to the program. And I'm very happy to have this program we have before lunch now. And I was starting to think about the talks that will be given and the persons that will be giving these talks. What is common for these people? The first thing I was thinking of is energy. Energy. And I have two of the speakers here in front of me, and that's typical energy people. And I haven't seen Jane yet. She's also energy. And this guy, Jason, he's energy. And then they combined energy with brilliance. I think that combining energy with brilliance, what happened then? Genius, development. I mean, it's really, it's fantastic. We will have 4 talks today, and we will start out with Darja. And I will not give a long presentation of you, Darja, but please stand up. Before we start, give you a warm applause for coming here. So Darja, she has been into this business for some time, and I would say you are a thought leader, is a quite good sort of in digitalization. And right now you try also to help the Prime Minister in the innovation policies and what we should do to keep up our sort of position. So it's a challenge, but it's one of 4 persons doing that. So I will give the word to you now, and I'm really looking forward to listen to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, and I'm honored and, to be honest, completely humbled to be here. It feels amazing because I know that there are so many brilliant people in this room. So the reason why I'm super happy to be here is that I'm looking forward so much to everything that I can learn if I get a chance. Apparently, to get that chance, I'm supposed to say a few words first, which is a bit scary, but I'll get to it. And I was asked to also talk on the topic of digitalization for sustainability, which I happen to think is a very interesting thing to discuss. Because we know what we need to do, and we know where we need to go, and we know that we need to get there faster. We need to transform the entire human society into something that is both ecologically, economically, and socially sustainable, because it's not right now. Right? I'm well aware that many of the things that we need to do to get there may be high-tech, but they're not necessarily very digital. For instance, an industrial nation such as Sweden should not only become fossil-free, but we should probably adapt at large-scale technology that will help us to clean the atmosphere and capture carbon dioxide. But having said that, it's still a bit frustrating to me that sometimes when we talk about ecological sustainability or sustainability at large, we don't really discuss it in the terms of how much the bits can matter, how much the data matters to actually get there. And I mean, I've been frustrated about that for quite some time because, to be honest, underestimating the power of the internet is not a very new thing. Smart people have done so before. Paul Krugman, world-renowned national economist, said this in the year 2000. The growth of the internet will slow drastically when it becomes apparent that most people have nothing to say to each other. By 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machines. Ouch. Also, 8 years after saying this, he was rewarded with the Nobel Prize in Economy from Sweden. Apparently not for having said this specific thing. So I'm sort of used to being frustrated about this, but what I really hope that we all agree on now is that it's rather like this. Digital is not an industry. Digital is a new dimension that humanity, we have created it for ourselves. I mean, we've always had to take into account room, space, and time in everything we had to do. And now we can take into account space, time, and digital in anything we do. Because regardless if we talk about the clothes that we're wearing, the roads, the streets that we're walking, the houses, the walls, anything that we produce, how we distribute it, how we consume it, it has a digital dimension that adds value and that has an impact on our appreciation and how we use it. It actually, the digital dimension even changes abstract things such as a concept of integrity. What is integrity? It's a concept that we develop in a cultural context. So what does that mean in a world with a digital dimension? What do we trust in a world with a digital dimension? We're used to trusting industrialized process and things being handled, implemented by people, and then we realize that they were biased, and now we can use algorithms, and we start trusting them, and we realize that they have a different kind of bias. But regardless, I think it's very interesting to think that we should and could use this dimension to increase the value of every atom on the planet and to maximize economic growth and use of what we can create endless amounts of, meaning bits. And I want to tell you a couple of examples of what we know that this can mean. Starting with the global goal of achieving health. Now one might think that health is not a super important global goal for, you know, a welfare nation such as Sweden, but that's not true, because the way we've handled things have given us the opportunity to live longer lives. But when we live longer lives, we tend to live for a long time with a lot of diseases. And that kind of becomes very complex and very expensive. So all welfare nations in the world have the similar challenge, that the cost of keeping us fit so that we can have some sort of life quality is increasing as the demography gets older and older. And that's one area where we also know that digital matters a lot, because it gives us the tools to get away from this problem that if we keep doing things the way we are now, it doesn't work anymore, it doesn't scale, we can't have this welfare working this way. But if we look at the innovations being done right now, we understand that we can handle it differently. We look at innovations such as this. This is an instrument that would allow me as a mother of 3 to check if my kid has an ear infection from home. I would not need to take my child to the waiting room, hang out there for 8 hours with people who have all kinds of different diseases, just to find out once again that it was not an ear infection. But I could rather just figure that out at home, saving money, time, making my life more convenient. We see a lot of innovations handling data to make diagnosis earlier. Neurotrack is one company that use digitalized services for cognitive tests that can diagnose Alzheimer's up to 6 years before the real symptoms really occur. Now that would save a lot of human suffering. That would mean a lot for the increasing number of people who will have to suffer through actually having Alzheimer's in their lifetime. We also see a movement of people taking things into their own hands, working alongside researchers, but really not waiting. There's a hashtag called "We Are Not Waiting," where people with diabetes have organized themselves to share research information, to share data about themselves, but more importantly, they have chosen to hack their glucose meters and their insulin pumps so that they, before the market would offer that to them, could have, you know, mobile services to check if your diabetic kid is having a problem at school or when they're sleeping, so that they could fine-tune their own treatment. Because after all, they would only meet their doctor every 6 months and so, or so, but keeping track of all this by themselves has really enabled them. And they've done so by hacking things, sharing code on GitHub, making it all open, and getting way ahead of where the market was just a few years ago. We see other really interesting innovations, such as Proteus. Back in 2012, they got FDA approval for technology that created swallowable sensors. Sensors that, when you have them in your stomach, they would use battery acids to close the battery circuit, giving it enough energy to ping a plaster that you have on your arm that in itself would talk to your mobile and then up to the cloud, sending immediate information about what kind of medication you had and some other biostats. Now, what would that really mean? We know that it's really incredibly expensive to do the clinical studies, that once you have a functional molecule, you need to figure out how to treat people with it. And since we're all so different, and it's difficult to know if people even took their medication, it's been insanely expensive. This kind of technology being rolled out this year, in effect, in actual medication, can mean a big difference. So everywhere we see these innovations, we also see platforms coming up, because companies have realized that platforms in this world meant a 30% cut of all the massive innovation that was created on the mobile phones. Naturally, platform position in a lot of areas will be very valuable, where data can be collected at huge scale and then used for all kinds of purposes, both for you as researchers and for innovative companies and for individuals. I talked to one researcher who said, well, let's just, acknowledge the idea that we may just be a decade or so away from a life where it's completely natural that when you brush your teeth in the morning, there's an automatic saliva test being done, where that information will be sent to the cloud, cross-referenced with DNA, automatically fine-tuning your dietary advice and your exercise pattern and whatever medications you might need right now. I can imagine some people are thinking, can she spell to integrity? Has she even heard of the concept? I can, I think. But I just want to say that many of these things are such opportunities to us. We know that we really need it, but naturally we also have to find the solutions that will make us in control of me as a patient, have some control of my data, who can use it when and for what purpose. But looking into the more ecological, the goals related to ecological sustainability, we also see that digital is important there. We understand that we need cities, we need to transform energy, we need to transform transport systems for us to be able to have a sustainable world. And that's why Sweden, for instance, has said that we're going to be one of the first fossil-free nations in the world on the year 2050. Now, that's not really enough. We should be there in 2035 if we really, really want to take some serious responsibility. And we know that we have a lot of the technological solutions needed. For instance, the cost of solar and the effect of them is dropping, still at a very rapid pace. And we need, at large scale, loads of small-scale solar energy producers. But if that's going to work, again, we need digital services, because we need these prosumers to be able to trade with each other. Now, these services already exist. Maybe not in Sweden at the moment, but we know we need them, and they are there. We also know that we need loads of batteries for this to work. They also exist. But we need batteries that, just as the home appliances in our houses, are way smarter than the pretty stupid grid still will be. Things that are smart enough to take into account the actual need of the grid and adjust their behavior accordingly. And this is interesting, because that's where the transformation of the energy system kind of is related to the transformation of the transport system. Because what is an electric car if not a battery? So big amounts of electric vehicles will actually be paramount in that transition, making the grid be able to handle large, massive amounts of small-scale energy production. And they also happen to have another interesting feature, namely, they're becoming autonomous. So what we understand now is that the transportation system of tomorrow, but it is the transportation system that we need to decide upon today, that we need to invest in today, that we need to actually push out to market today, has these three things in them. It's automized, it's service-based,
and it's fossil-free. It's a transportation system where we no longer own cars, where we actually just pay for getting from A to B in a system where different ways of transportations work together to give me or you the best convenience at this moment. There is a big difference traveling from central Stockholm to here in the morning or putting my 3 kids into something to get to the slopes because we're going skiing. I need completely different ways of transportation for that, and this will give us better convenience. It will also mean that we are actually saving a lot of resources, because right now we're not even used to seeing it, but we are wasting so much. An average European car is only used 5% of the time. 50% of an average European city area is used to facilitate roads and parking lots when we need it for completely different things. People, anyone. And this happens in every ecosystem, that we have huge amount of waste, also of raw material that we really can't afford. So we know that we need to change the entire systems so that we can have both production and consumption work in a way more sustainable way. I would like to mention then, because I think it's a very valuable tool for thinking, the Resolve framework that was introduced to me in a report that I found last year called Growth Within, a circular economy vision for a competitive Europe, really putting into numbers not only how much fossil fuels, how much better the climate will be, but also how much better business Europe can make by addressing this as an opportunity rather than a challenge, because we really are dependent on so much import of resources, and if we can use these solutions, we will get way better. So digital is needed in basically all of this, in regenerating, in sharing services, in optimizing systems, in closing loops, in virtualizing anything that can be virtualized. Going back to transportation again, we just need to understand we don't need more roads and we don't need more cars. We need more intelligent transport systems, and they are all based on data. Another challenge is to change behavior. And I think it's a different thing. Sometimes we can change behavior simply by offering services that are zero friction, that are better, that are more convenient. And that's what I think will happen with transportation. I don't worry about that. As consumers, we will adapt if we get the opportunity of having these solutions available to us. However, changing behavior related to other important things, such as food habits, is a trickier question. It's not that, obvious that it will be more convenient to stop eating so much meat. Here, I also think that digital services can make a big difference. Look at this startup in the US. They're called Good Guide. They're helping consumers make climate-informed decisions when standing in the store. But the problem is, as long as it requires you to open an app, it's only going to work for the most motivated people who, sort of don't need it anyhow. How could we make this kind of information available all the time? It should be on the price tag. Looking into initiatives that could hold such a promise, I see some things happening in supply chain innovation, trying to figure out using the data. I see GS1, the member organization that handles the barcode on everything, doing something interesting here when they're saying that they want to show data for the carbon footprint measurement of transport and warehousing in retail. Now that's a really interesting way of handling things, even though I could imagine that such an organization will get swamped into discussions on what is accurate enough data. And as soon as we're close to something that will show us differences between different brands, and me as a consumer is supposed to see that, it gets sort of tricky. What could we do to make it less dramatic? What could it mean something if I, for instance, I don't really need to see the difference between 2 brands of shampoo bottles. What if I could just see the actual impact of one more shampoo bottle, or the actual impact of that steak, regardless of who produced it? Perhaps that could bring us further. I think it could bring us to the point where we would at least be ready to accept addressing that it has a cost, an environmental cost. So regardless of what we're talking about, we need data. We need data to understand the complex systems that we've created, to see where we should put our effort. We need the data to optimize every system so that it's not so wasteful as it is today. We need it to give us, as consumers, the services we need to have a different behavior. We need it to virtualize anything that can be virtualized. How can it be that a digital book has a higher tax than a printed one? Does not make any sense. So I'm very happy to see that the global goals has this meaning, and it's very icon for it, saying that in this world with a digital dimension, data and structured open data is infrastructure. Because if data itself is the raw material we need for all the innovation, then making it accessible through interoperability and standards is the infrastructure we need, because we need the information at the large scale to create markets. We cannot keep locking it into proprietary systems all the time if we want to get anywhere. And I think the first time I sort of really realized that was looking at a neat research project from MIT back in 2009. It was called Trash Tracker. They took GPS trackers and smacked it on all kinds of electronic trash and threw it away. And with that, just in a couple of hours and days, they could actually see the very complex system of how trash is handled in the US unfold before their eyes. And they could see what sort of trash would actually travel across the continent, worst cases not only once. And that meant that they could see where things would need to be adjusted. Now imagine trying to set up that analysis pre-GPS trackers. Imagine going to all those places, digging through their paperworks, trying to see what kind of truck company was supposed to drive where, and then doing that impossible task, and then knowing that whatever your result was, you still would not really know if it corresponded at all to reality compared to this. So the thing is that just getting access to all of this makes it possible for us to see what we could not see before, to see what our society, which is in all itself a very complex structure, how it works, where to put our efforts. And I think this is key to making reforms also that actually have an impact in the world. And I think that the decision makers that we have today actually understand that, because this is not only for transportation or garbage collection. The EU Commissioner for Research, Science and Innovation just recently said that he believes that every science article from the Europe should be open access. Perhaps he read the University of Chicago study that showed there was a pretty strong correlation between open access publishing, being seen on Wikipedia, and actually reaching a larger audience with one's research. I hope you all are well aware of that. But he also said, we must create infrastructure. Europe's final transition must be one from fragmented data sets to an integrated European open science cloud. What would it mean to you as a researcher if you knew that you could access data from other types of research in a very simple way, if that was interoperable? What would it mean for your ability to do your own experiments and push things further? What will it mean for humanity that we have this communication revolution that the digital dimension is? I mean, when we learned how to speak, we know that way we learned to store information in each other's head. It helped us start solving more complex problems than other species could. When we learned how to write, we understand now that was the basis of logical reasoning. That was how we started thinking in abstract terms. That had a huge impact on what kind of problems we could solve. What did it mean when we learned to print information and spread it over time and space? We could have public schools. What does it mean that we have the internet? If we make all of this available, we are available to each other, and the knowledge that you are all pushing further becomes so much more available in a distributed network of human knowledge. This is one of the reasons why one of my personal favorite goals of the global goals has to do with education, has to do with making knowledge even more accessible to everyone whenever we need it. And talking about that, I think I'm coming from the perspective of realizing that growing up and living in Sweden with a population of 9.6 million, we are just a mid-sized city from a global perspective. We're a mid-sized city trying to add value, also sometimes claiming we should be the best at everything. Let's not talk too much about that. At the same time, we are seeing technology moving at a pace where even fairly sane people start thinking, I don't know about this. Are there going to be any jobs? Can we create any value once we get out of here? And I find it more inspiring to look at what actually happens when you put so much knowledge in the hands of just teenagers. Just Google teenage innovator and see all the fantastic, brilliant people there. Those are the ones that I hope that we get inspired by and slightly scared. What's interesting with that is that regardless of what we are doing, we understand that it's the pace of change that is our real challenge. There's an interesting book called The Future of Professions that just lists the knowledge workers, the lawyers, the doctors, the economists, and what it means with its technology evolution, with AI, with robotics, with access to other people's knowledge, and how much that requires us to change how we work, to adapt, to use new tools, to share knowledge in a different way, to learn a new thing and adapt it into our way of work next week. In fact, the CEO of AT&T, he has said, put it like this: anyone who does not put at least 5 hours per week into learning new stuff is smoked. Interesting then that our entire system is rather designed for you studying for the first 25, 26 years and then going off to work, and after that surviving on 5 to 6 educational or conference days a year. And apart from that, maybe sometimes you need to reconsider your career and then take like a 6 months to a year sabbatical and learn something new. That does not scale at all. It's insane. But at the same time, we're seeing a global market of really valuable stuff out there, accessible for anyone who cares to take notice. And for an audience such as this, I would like to say, wouldn't it be fantastic to see Swedish university take a huge step here and get up front rather than being laggards? Because I think that the global market of packaged higher education that is available in our everyday lives, that we can learn and study every week, that has a tremendous disruptive potential, not to kill universities, but to change our lifestyle, to make it into something where it's completely natural for most people to take a higher education course every quarter, at least. What would that mean? So to summarize things, I also think that we can do a lot to increase the speed in which all of this is happening. So I wanted to try out the idea of formulating 3 human rights that could increase that acceleration that at least I would like to have. I would like to have the right to receive proactive, personalized health services and treatment based on my individual profile. I don't really want other people to meddle too much about that. I think I have the right to expect it because I know it's important, both for my health today and for the future. I would like the right to make climate-informed consumer decisions every day, everywhere. I don't really need exact data from one brand or another, but I really need to understand better what it means when I buy the steak tomorrow night as well, compared to buying some vegetarian alternative. That would have an impact on me. And I understand that I need to get to a point where I'm ready to accept paying the real price, including environmental effects. And I think this would help me a lot. And I also want the right to get trustworthy knowledge and skill examination regardless of where I learned something, regardless or if I studied here at KTH, or if I studied in Mogadishu, or if I studied at Coursera, or if I studied at the University of YouTube, because that also happens. That really shouldn't matter. What would it mean to integration if we would simply validate knowledge regardless of where it came from? I hope that you have even more ideas. We know that we need to work inclusive. We know that we need to find the win-win solutions that makes everybody able to participate. We know that we need to work in iterations to try things small scale and scale it up to big scale. And I hope that we will all do it thinking that we want to increase the value of every single atom while maximizing growth with the help of bits. And I'm super happy if I can be a tiny part of it, because you're all doing it every day. Thank you.
So please, Darja, stay on stage. I mean, fantastic talk, and I think what is really fantastic with your talk is that what you say is often in this area when we talk about sustainability, we get into talking about doomsday and it's really dark, and what you're saying is that by using utilization and getting an informative global citizen, we will solve this. And I think that is extremely a positive message you give, which is really important.
And I know it's true, and I just want to say one thing. What we do know is that if we don't address this, we're looking at huge value loss and human suffering.
Yeah.
But again, this growth within report, it really put into numbers how much business opportunity there is.
Yeah. So, questions. We have time for some questions. Yep, there we have the first question. And here we have a mic. We will record the presentations and they will be available on the web.
Yeah, thanks for a very good speech. My name is Per-Ola Andersson. I was just mystified in the beginning because I think everything makes sense in terms of openness and sharing all the information and competence and knowledge. You had almost at the last bullet the legal ramifications for having countries not limiting the sharing of knowledge. Just so everyone knows, when the Panama letters were disclosed, China closed down internet immediately because most of their politicians put all the money in Panama. So I would like you to move that one a little bit higher up in your priority.
Thank you.
That legal bullet, I think it was 15 or 16.
Yeah.
Any comment?
If I understand you correctly, just emphasize even more how important it is that we have access to data. Yes.
Yeah.
I believe so. And in trying, I don't really work with media companies, but when I am asked to have an opinion, I'm saying I think that the best thing we can do in helping media companies is to make sure that that we need open data on transactions, on who made what decision when we talk about the ones that we elected. Because that would make the scrutiny of decision makers way cheaper and increase transparency. So there are so many angles to come at this, and I completely agree.
Yep, we have a second question here. And Jerker is running very fast here. He's a fast runner. Yep.
Det är en sak med information, och det är att kunna veta om den är sant eller är faktuellt. Det som jag har sett hur mycket jobb det är till exempel Wikipedia att se till att det är en kvalitet i information, och vi vet hur till exempel Ryssland vill sprida osanningar. Och då är detta en kanske lika komplicerad funktionalitet att se till att information är riktig.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, we could have one more hour only talking about open data infrastructure and what does it mean. And if we dig into different areas, then I think for me it's difficult to talk about that in a very broad general perspective. But if I should make one broad general remark, it's that when we handle information as infrastructure, looking at, for instance, health data or something else, it's important that we use standards not only to achieve interoperability, but it also has to do with understanding the quality. And those processes, at least for a lot of data that has a huge societal impact, the actual standardization process must be way more transparent also. So if we look at different areas, transport or health or whatever, we can then, who will have the responsibility of working with this can be different, public versus corporate initiatives, etc. Depends on the area. But I think, yes, my answer would be, in general, we also very much need to address the processes related to how we review where the data comes from, its quality, how it's standardized, and how it's made accessible. And I hope that sort of at least addresses your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Darja. An excellent talk. I will do something that is totally unplanned now, since we have 2 minutes. So now I will give you 2 minutes to talk with your neighbor what they are really sad. So please, 2 minutes. Okay, I will not give a summary of the talks, so we proceed to the next talk, and it's the second really energy person, brilliance, etc. Gamification will you talk about, and it's not gamification from a sort of traditional, gaming perspective. It's gamification in industry, taking the sort of new technology into traditional branches. And Susanne, she has a background from ABB many years, working with research in software, user interaction, higher productivity, etc. And now she has started to work for SICS, and she will be responsible for the process program from Vinnova, Strategic Innovation Program, PIA. But please, the floor is yours.
Thank you,
Susanne.
Christer. So happy to be here. And yeah, I was asked to talk about gamification. And gamification. So what is gamification? So if gamification and take the Wikipedia.
Should we? It sounds very strange. It's coming up and down.
Yeah, okay. So typical game challenge. So, yeah, do you hear me? Better? Okay, great. So gamification is the process of using game mechanics and the process of gamification, applying that into another domain. So you take game elements, applying them in another domain for engaging and motivating users. So that is what gamification is about. And then if you look at some studies, you can see that 71% of the population is not, they are not motivated at work. And then if you draw the parallel that if you're motivated, if you're engaged, you're 26% more productive at work. So that's why I want to connect gamification to that process or to that thinking, because, and also saying that fun at work is serious business. So then the goal of this presentation is that you should understand what gamification is about. I want you to understand the connection with gamification and industry. And then to do that, I've set up this presentation as a game, so you will actually experience gamification, or that is at least my intention. And of course, in games, you need rules, so that's the first thing. So if all women can raise up their hands. Yes, okay, and all men. Okay, so remember now your colleagues, so you will compete now, men against women. And so that is the rules. And what's also really important is that you will, you will see the progress. So this is your two teams. So pink ladies and blue men. So you will go from this spot to the end, the goal. And what is measured is the number of interactions you have with me. But so I will give you a challenge, and you need to answer that challenge, and you get points for that. And what you also will do is to level up during the presentation. So we will start with the first level soon. So I just want to give you a few words of myself. So this is me. Last week at Skutskär Bruk, Stora Enso, a paper mill, which was, Christy already said, I worked for ABB, grown up in the industry, have a software background, worked a lot with user experience when I realized I had developed really complex to use products, and working with ease of use, effectiveness, and providing fun products. Also a comment to this, I will actually work as a summer worker at Skutskär Bruk as an operator, which that will be super exciting. And then let's go to PIA, just a short explanation. What is PIA? So PIA is a strategic innovation program that is funded by Vinnova, Formas, and Energimyndigheten. And why do we have this strategic innovation program? Yeah, that is to make it possible for process industry to be competitive in the future, to not become this lazy cat drinking a light beer thinking that we're super good, but to really take some action and do something about it. And to not become, in 10 years, become these closed down factories, as you will see here, but to take the opportunity to stay competitive. So PIA has funds for making that possible. But now we start with the game, so level 1. And what you see here is the level 1 in Super Mario. And the leveling, that is a game mechanics you usually see in all kind of games. And in the first level in Super Mario, what you do is you jump. You learn to jump. That is the mechanic you're really showing that you will manage. The overall target is for Super Mario to go from the first to the start point to the end goal and maybe save the princess. So to do that, he is jumping then. And that is the common goal for all levels in Super Mario. But on the first level, it's jumping. So when you see a question mark on the screen, I will ask you a question, and then you're encouraged, and you get points for answering that question. So first level is about creating an understanding of what is gamification, the basics within game design. And this was the figures I mentioned before. Why is it important? Yeah, if we have more fun at work, we are more productive. And what makes us, what motivates us? Yeah, it is to have fun, it is growth and recognition. And that is crucial elements that you find in all kinds of game. You have fun, you get feedback, you see progress, and you actually grow as a player. And then if you look at gamification, it actually origins in the field of user experience. So that is one twist in user experience. I worked in user experience for quite some long time, and I just want to explain the importance of that. It is, as I said, to be out where you have the users, to really understand them, to be able to design products and systems that are easy to use, effective to use, and also fun to use. And the gamification part really focus on the experience part of user experience. And you can imagine that this is quite important if you think about a big company where you have a department for software development, you have a department for the market department, who has the access to the customers and the users. And at the user side, you also have the same kind of chain. So to get the user's needs from the user to the product developer, it's quite a long chain, and in some cases it's like a whisper game. So this connection is very important to develop good products. So that was very short about user experience. And of course in the industry it's really important to understand the domain. I mean, it's an extreme environment, and if you sit in a office space that looks like this, you cannot design good products and systems if you don't know for what extreme environment you're designing it for. Okay, so now to gamification. And what I've realized and what I think and consider is really interesting with this field is that it's a lot of tensions in the field. So you will find gamification research, and the gamification research talks a lot about the processes, the methods, what is it about, how to take these game design elements, putting them in another domain, and so on. And they are quite, on earth, to say. And then you have the evangelists, and the evangelists think that they can save the world applying gamification. So Jane McGonigal is an evangelist that I follow quite a lot, and for example, her main goal is to take the Nobel Prize in peace. So that's the evangelists. And then you have the game developers who think that both the evangelists and the gamification research just talks and talks. They don't do anything. I mean, the game developers, they know how to do this. They have designed games. What is this talk about? And then you have the user experience, who just see that gamification is one spot of the experience part of user experience. It's really their field. So it's a lot of tensions. And I'm working now in a strategic project, together with Find It, that is funded by PIA, where we have people from all these different disciplines in the project. And that is quite a fun experience. So then, what is a good game? If you think about the computer game, you probably think about points, the badges, scoreboards, giving points, doing an activity. But there are more crucial elements that needs to be in a game to have a good game. And if you look at this flow diagram, I think you all have seen it, probably once or twice. It talks about how important it is to have people in this flow channel to be productive, to feel good. So on one axis, on the x-axis, you have your skill, and on the other axis, you have the challenge. If you get too little challenge, you're bored. If you get too much of a challenge, you get stressed and don't feel good. If you look at computer games, they are perfectly designed around this flow channel. They always strive for having their user in the flow channel. And that is also something that is part of, like a mandatory thinking or at game developers. They want to design, it's the first rule, always design so that the user can manage the game, to keep them in this flow channel. And then when they are in this flow channel, they sometimes drop. You get down, you maybe fail a challenge, but you will still be in this flow channel. And the intention of that is that you will learn from your mistakes. You're supposed to fail once or twice, to reflect upon what did I do wrong in this game, to then improve. And then to some other parts, is it just points and badges, and what is a game? This is a picture of Bianca, my daughter, and this is inspired by Sebastian Deterding, who is a researcher within gamification. So this is my daughter, Bianca, when she's out jumping, and it just reminds me very much of my way to my school. So I started from home, I went like 2 kilometers to school. It was a really boring road. But when I then started to take my walk, I made up a lot of stories. It was like, I was going in a forest, it was a lot of demons, and if I didn't manage to jump on these lids where you had a K, I was really failing, become eaten by the demons. And if I accidentally were jumping or touching a lid where you had this A, than it was I needed to stand still, for example, for 3 seconds. So as people, we are game developers. We think about gamification just to make our lives more fun. So meaning is a really crucial part of all games. And then another really important thing you find in all games is feedback. I think you all can have a connection to these two pictures. I mean, when you cut the lawn, for example, you start to build up like patterns. You divide this whole lawn you're going to cut in sequences. You do it with different patterns. And when you're painting the walls, it's really nice to get this immediate feedback on the result. So feedback is really crucial. Immediate feedback, but also progress feedback. What you see here on the wall is the progress feedback. And then the freedom, sense of freedom. It needs to be a free playground where you all can meet in the game. So just as a summary on this first level, so it's not just points, badges, awards. It needs to have a meaning. You need to have immediate feedback embedded. And it needs to be a space of freedom. And now let's see if you can level up. So what is gamification about? Having fun. Yeah?
Staying in the flow channel.
Staying in the flow channel, yes. Yes?
Make mistakes.
Makes mistakes to learn, yes, definitely.
Earn money.
Earn money. Yeah, in the end, maybe. Okay. Motivate people, perfect.
You still have meaning. It requires feedback.
Yeah, super, Darja. Yeah, so women in the lead. So let's go to the level 2. So if you remember Super Mario, in the first level, he learned to jump. In this level, he's also learning to jump, he's shooting, and he's doing those two in parallel. It's still the same target, going from A to B, saving the princess. But the level, here you need to be, more skilled in combining those two mechanics that is a part of the game. And what you will do now in the second level of the application is to see examples where gamification has been applied. So first one, a really crappy picture of Runkeeper, but Runkeeper is a typically gamified application. So what you're doing, gamification is usually really good to put on something where you have an activity you're doing, but you want to do that activity more fun. And that is exactly what Runkeeper do. It measures the distance, it measures the speed to engage you to run more, to motivate you better. Another example is Stack Overflow. Have you seen Stack Overflow? Do you know what it is? Yes, I guess so. Yeah, yes, of course. So Stack Overflow is a complete, is a knowledge base, origins from software. And you get points for asking questions, you get points and awards for answering the questions. And then you build up your own reputation in this forum. And even if you would remove all kind of points and badges in this system, it would still have a meaning. So it's also an application that really shows that it has a meaning, which is a crucial thing in all applications that are gamified. Another example that shows gamification in one way is Airbnb. Also in this system, similar to Stack Overflow, you have this, you're voting both the person who is renting the house and you're voting the actual renter. So it is a similar mechanism in one way as you have in Stack Overflow. But what it also is, it's like completely user-driven. It is like it's managed itself, and that's also something that is very common in gamification. You have user-driven applications that is driven by motivation, freedom, and so those are two applications that shows that. Another thing that you see in Stack Overflow that is very common is this mastery that combines the gamification with that you actually are, learning something. It's connected to a skill that you really want to have. You are proud for it. It's a good community where you want to show off. And then another thing that is an element that you Let's see if you can level up. So, what is important when you apply gamification? Can you give some examples of things you usually see in gamified applications?
Getting progress feedback.
Super, Daria. You are like this master student. Leveling, yeah. Developing skills. Community, yes. User-driven.
I think it's interesting when you also mention different. I mean, you can get the status for showing mastery, but you also want freedom, of maybe exploring more of the world or whatever. So
Yeah.
you need the rewards that are of different types.
Exactly.
Different motivations.
Yeah, you need the rewards that are really also meaningful for you.
Moving to them.
Yes. Yeah. Learning. Yes. Mastery, absolutely. It's a crucial part of games. Okay, still women in the lead. So let's see. Now we come to the level 3. And what you also see in the levels is that it's not only linked to, for example, getting points. Now I have 1,000 points, I level up. Level 2, I get 2,000 points. It's linked to something gets more complicated. You're tested in another way. So, for example, in this level, you will see that the track that Super Mario needs to travel is more complex. He needs to be much more efficient when using the mechanics in the game. Okay, so now what you will be tested on in this level is the industry connection. And I've been working for ABB for quite some long time, and 2010 we did this extensive study, user study, interviewing operators. And the result was that we saw 3 kinds of operators working in the control room. And as I think all of you know, is that we have a generation shift in industry. We will change, I mean, the new people that have grown up with other technologies now entering the industry. And that we also see in the control rooms. So in this picture, you see 3 people, 3 persona description, fictive descriptions of typical operators working in the control room. You have Tom, who is a senior operator. So he's responsible for the shift team. He's working a lot with analysis and doing more preventive analysis to make the process run efficiently. He has 20 to 25 years of experience within the same company. He has worked for 15 years out in the field. He knows all equipment. He knows the mechanics. He can both work hands-on and he can control and monitor the process through the software systems. Then you have Kumar. He's also really experienced. He has worked 15 years in the company. Have also extensive background from the field, and is a mechanical engineer from the beginning. And then you have these new operators that are coming into the control room that typically in Sweden start directly after high school. And they are very dependent on Tom and Kumar in this case. So Nick is very dependent on these 2 more experienced operators, because the system today is very much designed based on their experience and not Nick's experience. So if you ask Nick, it's a lot of waiting in the control room. It's hard to keep you alert and focused, because in the control system, it is a lot of waiting. I mean, the process goes as smooth as possible if you don't need to do any action. And then if I then exaggerate Nick a bit, he's born 95, typically generation Z or late Y. I will not go into the generation details in this presentation, but he has played computer games since the age of 5. He has an APM on 220. Do you know what APM is? No. Actions per minute. Yes. So he has an action per minute on 220 in the computer game StarCraft, and that goes extremely fast. I did not manage to get the... Yeah, it works. So you see, here's a Korean player. Do you see the movie? Yeah. And he has an APM of 370. And then you can also imagine that Nick's best friend, he has the highest level in World of Warcraft. And if you have the highest level in World of Warcraft, you're leading distributed armies in a virtual world. And there you can imagine the future leaders. It's typically skill you need to have working for a global big company. And then multitasking, and then getting all this immediate feedback on what you're doing. This is like the typically day life. This is how the typically day life looks for the next generation. And then they come to the control room, where they're supposed to have 5 actions per hour if it's a critical situation. So we have like a new type of human that is emerging. So this pre-study, or this project I was talking about, trying to address this, how can we apply gamification in an industrial context to create a more engaging system? So if you remember these descriptions I gave on the personas, Nick, Kumar, and Tom, what you usually do in computer games, you work with player types. So we have developed 5 different player types based on the control room operators. So we have the achiever, we have the creative, the player, the socializer, and the disruptor in the control rooms. The achiever typically likes to check off lists. You have the creative that likes to solve puzzles. You have the socializers that are getting motivated by the social interaction with others. And you have the disruptor, which is he does things his way, which is a good skill to have as well. And you have the player who really likes to run the system. And based on that, you can see what motivates these different players. Now I will go in a bit referring to Jane McGonigal's work. So she, as I said before, is one of the evangelists in the area. And this is a picture that is developed as part of her research. And what they have done is that they have recorded players in the game World of Warcraft. And this is the moment before this player takes home the epic win. So before he realizes what he is fully capable of achieving. And you see he's fully focused it's a super nice picture. But instead, we're really good in feeling really, in the games, we're a better version of ourselves, or we are the version that we would like to be. But then in real life, we feel not as good. It's really, and what then is important why do we prefer to live in the computer world? So there is always a bigger meaning. The computer games are always designed to meet our capability. We always have a whole crew that wants to support us in the game to take the next step, and there's never any waiting. So if we just could build in those things within our industrial systems, we could create a difference. And then there's also research connecting to when do you get a real professional? It's the number of practice you are doing. And figure shows that next generation, when they are 21 years old, they will have played 10,000 hours of computer games. So they will have like a whole, generation that are professionals in gaming. Couldn't we just apply that thinking to make our products more effective and better and more fun? And then I have some examples on connection to the industry. You can imagine, it's not so hard to apply Facebook maybe and also Stack Overflow to have a knowledge base to improve our operator skills in the control rooms. That could be a gamified application. This is another, and here we have applied 3D technology and a gaming engine to develop a more engaging application for follow-up of discrete the assembly process at ABB Robotics. And who wouldn't like to be the knight of the night shifts? So let's see if you can level up. And this time it's even harder because I will not even ask the questions. Sorry, gamer types. Yeah.
Use gamification to keep people alert.
Yeah. Great. Big leap for the women. Yeah. No waiting, no.
Use growth hacking, do gamification to get people to take action. Build blockchain-based tracking of value so we can gamify everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the evangelist talking. Yeah. Sorry. All kids are not gamers. No, absolutely. It's a good reflection. So, sorry.
Banana now management.
Banana. Yeah, okay. Yeah. No waiting, yeah. Juicy feedback. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think we have a clear winner. So the goal with the presentation, I hope you have at least some more knowledge about what gamification is, that you have experienced parts of it. And remember meaning, feedback, freedom, mastery, and that fun at work is really serious business. Thanks a lot.
Keep the mic.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure you will have some questions here. Thanks for a fantastic presentation. It was a game. I appreciated that. And I also saw some really competitive people in the audience.
Yes.
Some extreme competitive people. So, questions, please.
Hi, have you received any pushback from mature industries when you're trying to introduce gamification as part of a user interface? And how do you address that pushback of not being taken seriously when you introduce gaming?
Yeah, actually, we have mainly received really positive response. And that is because the industries today have a challenge attracting new people into the industry. Because it is, I mean, if you are in an industry, it's like super engaging. It's like really cool stuff you're working with. And if you just attract the next generation to really get there and to have fun at work, it's a really huge difference you can make. So mainly it is positive response. But then a common misunderstanding with gamification is that it's turning everything into a game. There is a lot of competition, you see a lot of like cool technology, and it doesn't need to be cool technology as you saw in the examples. It's just applying small elements to make it more engaging.
Hello. Yeah, I think you posed one of the challenges very well, which is how to connect this fast-moving computer game mentality to the real world. And I can think there are applications of that, but in particular in terms of a process industry, a lot of those processes are in real life quite slow. And I didn't see what you actually were doing to Nick in the control room to keep his interest up.
Yeah.
Because the process he is monitoring might be very slow.
Exactly.
Actually. So
yeah. Yeah. You know. So it's, I mean, that is a challenge. It is because the process is going more and more automatically. It requires less and less actions from the users. But as examples, what I can, I mean, we are not done with the project yet. So. But you have these mastery levels, for example, to making it more clear that you develop as a person in the company. You start as a novice operator, but then in the end you're a ninja operator that can manage and supervise others. To make that more visual, for example, and to maybe make the routine tasks that the operator are doing, to do them more engaging. So for example, doing maintenance, field tours, cleaning, taking measurements and samples out in the industry. Making that part more engaging is one thing we are working with for the moment.
Yeah. How do you manage people who don't want to participate within organizations? And who do you think should create the rules?
Yes. Do you mean who? Do you mean the users that don't want to participate, or the?
Yeah, the co-workers, for example. If you have people who don't want to participate in a game, but the manager decides that everyone should participate.
Yeah.
How do you manage the people who don't want to participate? And who do you think should?
I mean, it is based on the assumption, at least, that you have co-workers that want to make the company successful. I think that is like a basic, what do you say, assumption we are doing. But then we also base it on like what is motivating that co-worker. If we have a lot of co-workers that don't want to work, why is that? What is, I mean, everybody has some kind of motivation. Can't we like pull that up and make them engage and want them to participate in this game, controlling the process?
So can you speak a little bit to the ethical issues with, for example, I heard that there was a lot of attempts to gamify more low-skilled jobs, especially in the US, where I come from. And a lot of the times it's more to drive productivity. The goal is really to drive productivity versus to make people engaged, and mostly makes people burnt out, of course.
Yes.
Can you speak to ethics of it, please?
I can just give a comment that it's, I mean, there is a dark side of gamification that you can use. And we try to use the good side of gamification, not turning our products and systems into that things. We want to decrease the stress levels. But I think I need 1 hour to go into that topic, so.
Okay, I think we close the questions now. We will give you more questions during the break we have, and we will be back at 11 o'clock here. And a big applaud for Susanne. Hello, hello. Okay, now we have the next talk, which will be given by Jane Valerud. And introducing Jane is very difficult or very easy because, I mean, she's brilliant. She has a lot of energy and she is super fast as well. And she is a serial entrepreneur with a lot of successful exits. So the floor is yours, Jane.
Thank you. Right. So I'm Jane. I've actually realized that I know a lot of you here. It's been fun seeing some faces of people I've known for 20 years or even longer. It's great. I am not actually a computer person. Once upon a time, I was studying psychology at Stanford, and I had some term papers to type, and was then and am still a lousy typist. I make lots of errors. This is in '79. I could not afford to pay somebody else to type my papers. But on the way between where I lived in my dorm and my classes, the shortest way was through a time-sharing computer center called LOTS. And I noticed that there people could type and then correct their typing errors before they printed things out, so they could actually do that. Okay, that was fantastic and wonderful. I had a chance of being able to turn in my term papers and actually getting the credits I needed that quarter. Great. So with a week left of term, my finals were over. I got an account at this time-sharing place and sat there day and night for a week typing. I was a very lousy typist. Then I was slow and bad. Now I'm fast and bad. And after a couple days, the guys there, because they were all guys, '79, they were really, well, there were 5 women and hundreds of men. I was one of the 5. Said, oh, geez, there's a girl there, and she's here all the time. So they made friends. And I've spent the rest of my life with computer people because of them. Okay? So that's what the machine I started off on, correcting my typos. Right, so what do? I start companies. These are the ones I've done the last 15, 20 years, 15, 16 years now. Bluetail was what we did when we got Erlang out of Ericsson. I guess I was the one who got Erlang out of Ericsson open source. Erlang has been a wonderful success, and it's because it is a fantastic programming language, absolutely fantastic, which was the right programming language at the right time. Its timing was excellent. Okay. We use that to do Bluetail. Klarna, a lot of you know of. It does payments, basically, on the internet. Lensway, those of you who have glasses really ought to think about buying them from Lensway, because you can upload a picture of yourself, the one you like, and then put glasses on your face and look at the way you look, actually. Okay? This is a very good thing, rather than having to take your glasses off and then not seeing yourself when you're trying on these things. Excellent. You can also buy contact lenses on the net. Tekla Networks, I sold we made TCP IP optimization, made LTE networks around 60% faster. We sold that. The deal was closed exactly 3 weeks ago today. So I'm fresh out of that one. It was a management team of Tobii doing their handicap stuff. First investor, then board member, then CEO for Ellen, which is probiotic tampons. One that wasn't IT. Panopticon, data analytics. Mecon was a physics motor for computer games, gamification. Right? So that in this computer game, this is the gravity level, this is the friction level, that sort of thing. This is how thick the air is. Libego was also a handicap product, digital pocket memory. Midsummer uses the machines that were otherwise used to make DVDs, and instead of doing DVD on plastic, they do solar cells on stainless steel, which means they're very good quality, around 15%, I believe, efficiency. And what's really good about them is that they're on stainless steel. So you drop them, it's about like dropping a spoon. It doesn't break, right? So if a goat walks on them, that's fine, no problem. You can put them, You can bump them, you can throw into the back of your car. They don't have to be in some sort of a rigid frame, as most solar cells do, because they're with about a micron thick of silicon. Telco games was a great idea. People with feature phones really want to play some sort of a game while waiting for the bus. Fantastic idea. We were between the games developers and the mobile network operators. And then Apple came with a better idea. What the hell are the mobile network operators earning any money on this for? Let's go from the games developers to the users directly, right? Much better idea, so we died quickly. Sunline invested in, and within a month it was dead because I didn't check whether they had a shareholders agreement before I did that. Anyway, that's what I do. I should add another one. I've just invested in one more. So the more I work, the better it goes. The ones that have gone really badly, over here. The ones that have gone really well are up there, or over there. So I'm trying to learn that so that I'm saying, okay, I can't take more than about 2, 3, and I have to be active in them. I have to actually work in them. I have to be one of the gang. And why is that? I think it's because I've been in so many startups. Not only these, I did 3 when I was much younger, plus my father had a few companies, my mother had a few companies, my sister has companies, her husband has companies, my daughter has a company. The whole family is only companies, right? So it just is, right? I think my daughter's had 3 so far. So I know, I can feel it when I need to get nervous. And I can feel it when everybody else is nervous and I'm not nervous at all. It's okay, not a problem. It's okay. And I think that's actually very useful to have somebody like me who's done 15 startups or thereabouts, and 5 of them world-class successes. To have somebody like me in a startup saying, oh, well, sure, I'll take out the trash, no problem. And I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll be part of customer service and I will pick and pack contact lenses and I will, at the moment, the new one, I'll call Karlstad's come in and say, we need to build a factory, you gonna help us? Right, so I was, well, how do I choose these things? I'm always getting this question. I always think about Porter's 5 factors, okay? Porter is named Michael Porter. He's a very famous Harvard professor, extremely famous Harvard professor. This is one of his main theories. The different factors in your strategic position, okay? And no startup has all these right, okay? Nobody. Do not expect it. But basically, if you have only a few customers, 1 to 1,000 or thereabouts possible, they end up negotiating. They know their power. They negotiate too hard. So that you end up with very long sales cycles. You end up with much lower prices than you can survive on. You end up being eaten by your customer. They say, well, we won't actually buy from you, we'll buy you. Or if there are few enough of them, let's say, we won't buy from you, and pretty soon you're going to go in bankruptcy, aren't you? You know, you can have a job with us if you like. Okay, that's a customer power, right? Suppliers can do the same thing. If you have some really key supply, not papers and pens, but something really, really key, and there's only 1 that can do that, or 2, well, then they can do the same thing to you. Oh, you need a few more of our machines. Well, that's great. You can have them in 3 years. And by the way, the price has tripled. And what are you going to do about it? Would you like to come to work for us? Yeah. You'll have much more impact if you work for us. Okay. So that's supplier power. It's better to have a number of customers, right? None of whom are extraordinarily important to you. There are always a range of customers, but preferably not just a few. A range of suppliers. The best thing is to be about like most of the IT companies I know, where you basically have to have Amazon, or you have to have cloud, you have to have paper, you have to have pen, you have to have a desk somewhere, maybe just a sofa somewhere. That's easy. Okay. The other ones are not. Barriers to entry are things like brand names. If you get thirsty and are interested in some water, are you going to go get Ramlös, or are you going to get Jane's Stockholm water? I bet you're going to choose Ramlösa because you know what it tastes like, and you never know what Jane has put into that Stockholm water, right? So that's a brand name. If you have a brand name, then then other people can't really get in, right? If you have a customer relationship and other people can't really get in, for instance, my husband hates to shop for clothes, and there's finally one guy, his name is Douglas, who has a store, who understands Bengtens, who says, right, so here are the trousers you need, and by the way, you probably need a sweater to go with a pair of blue trousers that we sold you 3 months ago. And Bengtens, my husband's name is Bengtens, is very, very loyal, to the point where I got him a Christmas sweater from a place that wasn't Douglas, and he asked, is this from Douglas? And I said, no. And he said, well, let's return it, because I want Douglas to have control over my wardrobe. This is customer loyalty. No other men's clothing store can get in there at all. It's banked is loyal to Douglas. You can also have barriers to exit. Say you've bought a whole bunch of airplanes. You have to keep flying them. Even if the amount of money you get per seat on that airplane is really very low, you still have to get a little bit in order to pay off your loans. Or if you drilled an oil well, you've put a lot of cost in there and you've got a lot of loans for it. You have to keep on pumping that as long as the money you're getting is just slightly over the amount it costs to just pump it, not all the original cost. So those are pretty important. Substitutes, remember that picture I just showed you of a mini computer, a DEC 20? Those are dead now. They've been dead for quite some time. The PCs took them and killed them. And now the smartphones are killing the PCs, actually. It's just, you can see the new technology coming and going to kill, right? Fawcett had, I guess for most of you what's important is that this thing, which is what I generally use and like, is turning more into this thing, which I don't like quite as well, but that I'm old. This one here is getting better all the time, right? And the apps on it are actually better than the apps on the laptop, so it's getting better. So I'm pretty sure that the laptops will become more specialized. How many people actually have a standalone desktop thing that stays at their desk? I might have one you left. You've had it for the same one for 5 or 10 years, probably. And there's something called rivalry. And that is how god-awful are you in the industry to each other? The worst on this is life science. You'd think that those doctors and nurses were nice people. They're not. They're miserable to each other. Just it's the worst of all. Which is one of the reasons I'm really rather leery. I've done 2 life science companies. I'm really rather leery of going into another one because you never know who's going to stick a knife in your back or start to infringe your patents. And then you can't defend yourself if you don't have money. So this is what I choose on, okay? All right, so one of my kinds of companies is like Bluetail and Teklo. People like you, really smart techies, they don't have anybody business. So I throw myself into the gap. And I'm the CEO, I'm the business person, and we make something incredibly, fantastically wonderful technical. And then we sell it to a few customers, but what we do is we just prove the value of it. And then we sell the company to one of the other ones in the industry. We're basically outsourced R&D. It works, it's profitable as hell. Right, so what we do is we try, because these people are so brilliant, they come up with ideas that this will be necessary in about 3 years. I'm sure you guys do too. I come up with none of these ideas, just so you know. None of the ideas that I've ever made a company of are mine. I have ideas that are lousy. It's everybody else's ideas that I make into companies. All right, so this is what we do. Bluetail was $150 million after 18 months. Teklo, I can't tell you, but it was pretty good too. Not quite as good. Another one of my kinds of companies is ones where they have the whole team. You have more driven business people. And then I maybe know some techies, or they're young business people, like in Klarna, where I can be pseudo-mom, basically, an experienced entrepreneur who's there quite a bit, and just say, right, so how do you use your time, Mr. CEO? Company's 5% bigger than it was last week. which it was for Lensway. 5%, we were growing about 15-20% a year, or a month, and so every week was about 5% bigger. So I would go to Daniel and say, okay, so the company's 5% bigger. How do you use your time? Is there any set of things you're doing which can be a job that we recruit somebody to? That's what I did quite a bit, okay? What do I care about there? The business people run the business, right? I tend to care that the tech people get respect. I want tech people to be owners of the company. I find that that works a whole lot better than outsourcing to God knows where. These ones can become quite large employers. The outsourced R&D, really not more than around 20-30 before we sell it. These can be, I guess Klarna's up to 1,500 or 2,000 now. Lensway's 150. This, you generally don't start with barriers to entry. I care a lot about barriers to entry. We don't start with it, but we build them in time. So Lensway, it was actually hard to get a hold of contact lenses. Klarna has really good algorithms for deciding who's going to pay. So they can actually accept more deals, more payments through Klarna than their competitors can. So it's easy for a website to compare how many do they sell through Klarna and how many they sell through XXS company, and Klarna's more. They'll go with Klarna, right? And this is either a trade sale, like we did with Lensway. We sold to their main competitor, Coastal Contacts, on the other side of the Atlantic, or an IPO, and I guess Klarna's on its way to IPO. Right, so my kind of people, you guys, girls, what you're generally lousy at is communication. Work on it, please. Okay, I know a guy that I got really frustrated with just yesterday, who's got a fantastic idea and a bunch of patents and a wonderful technical idea. And I said, right, so you need a business person. Why don't you talk to this business person, right? This is a gift. Here, you have somebody you need, right? And the business person then emailed and called, right? And this brilliant person didn't call back or email back for 3 days. 3 days. That means that contact is lost. That company possibility is lost. It's miserable. Okay? Really miserable. Another thing is that you tend to believe that you can figure out what people think about your product, how they're going to use it, with your own brilliant brains. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to talk to customers. You have to watch them use your product. You have to talk to them and ask them what they need. You have to talk all the time to your customers and then bring that knowledge in. It isn't true that they're necessarily right about everything, but they're right about quite a bit of stuff. So this is something you guys are generally, you might not feel that it's a bad thing, but most of the, I've had mentorships where I talk to a guy with an absolutely amazing program, and he says, it's fantastic, and this is back when, Microsoft has endorsed it, and Microsoft then was just enormous. It was the one, Microsoft has endorsed it. I said, great, how many have you sold? Sold? Do you have any people you call who would like to buy this? Oh, no. Maybe you should start calling people. Oh, who should I call? Well, find out this, somewhere around here you can start there. And I talked to him again 3 weeks later. He'd spent the intervening 3 weeks building up a beautiful CRM database and not called one customer. You laugh, it's true, okay? It's miserable, okay? But that's what I do for, basically that's what I do for people like this, right? Okay? So for my kind of people, if there's an upside risk is you've got too much money, what the hell am I going to do now? It's actually a real problem. It is a real problem, okay? A good friend of mine who's been in the 3 startups now. I guess he was 26 when he had enough money for the rest of his life, right? What the hell do you do now? How are you going to contribute? What are you going to do with your life? All of the normal goals one has of enough money for a house and maybe a new bicycle. It's not easy, actually, okay? But it's a nice problem to have. It's really what's known as a first world problem, but it isn't easy. The downside risk for you guys, it's about, let's call 30 minutes, and I'm generous now to get a new job. More like 5. Why am I saying a roller coaster? Well, that's what being on a startup is like. Ups. Whoa, they called us. It's fantastic. They loved it. They want it. Oh, and downs. We're going to be in bankruptcy in about 3 weeks. What do we do now? Okay, it really is that way. And that's why I keep on doing startups, is I need that level of stimulus to be happy. I'm a junkie on that kind of excitement. And you know, that's what it is. That's what I do. Right, so this is what I guess I was going to talk about. Do you have any questions? Does anybody have any startups? You need some new business people? My daughter has gotten old enough where she actually knows people who are useful. She's 26 soon, and I'm starting to say, okay, do you know anybody else from K? Do you know anybody else from Hondos? Do you know anybody else with a couple, 3, 5 years of experience? And they're coming. They are. It's great. So, questions?
So first, a big applause.
Oh, okay.
Before the questions here, I think you got an offer here, really. So come on. Questions?
Yeah, it's an offer. I've got, I think, 8 business people, all of them good in different ways, who could use technical ideas to turn into businesses with you all, right? Okay, yep. You first, yeah?
Wait. No.
Back.
Okay. Hello. Yes, I'm doing small-scale fish farming indoors, and we try to make a food production in Sweden.
Fantastic.
We are competing with imported fish that is a very low price, but is then produced on totally different regulations than are in Sweden. So what we have to do is to get very clever and do this with good animal health and welfare, and still make a profit. So the idea is to go small and do a lot of small farms.
Franchising, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, but have you any idea of how we could get going on this?
Sure. Right, so that sounds like a franchise operation, like McDonald's or iTrim, right? So you need to, and franchising is well understood and well known how to do it. You probably need to build a brand name around your locally produced, sustainable, high quality, healthy fish. Don't destroy the mangroves, don't destroy the whatever. So you want to do a brand name strategy, and you probably want to do a franchising strategy. And in order to do that right, you need an investor who's done franchising before. There's a guy called Lederhausen, who is the son of the guys who started McDonald's, who does do investments into franchising. He's absolutely brilliant and lovely. So go ahead, Lederhausen, franchising, build your brand, and it's probably around sustainability, Swedish, health, whatever.
Yeah. Thank you, yeah.
Which one? Okay.
Thank you very much for the stimulating talk. I would like to have something more from the talk. And the question that I have come up to ask is, what are the 3 books that you have read recently which somehow reflect your lessons that you have learned backwards, yet also stimulate you to look forwards or in the future?
Okay, I sold a company 3 weeks ago. And it was a hell of a problem. The due diligence was 329 questions long, and most of the questions need to be answered like, here you have a file structure. And I did most of that myself, because we were a small company. So I actually have, what I've been reading and doing recently has been more with my other interests, and that's basically a lot of national economics. I've been thinking national economics is pretty exciting since around 2007, and it got really very exciting around 2008. So it's a lot of that stuff. I don't think it really helps you. If you want books that actually work for startups, then I would say start off with Influence by a guy named Cialdini. I'll write that down somewhere. How? Here. This one is how you get people to do what you want them to do, as in buy your products. Very important. There's one called Spin Selling by Rackham. How to sell complicated stuff. There's one called Lean Startup by Rice. This is the current Bible of how to start companies. That's what everybody does if you're doing an IT low-cost startup. Okay? If you're doing something else like fish farming, it's got to be different. But that's an IT startup. If you're looking for most other kinds of startups, then I think you probably ought to do Crossing the Chasm by Moore. Okay? That's all old stuff. I'm old.
Someone else? No. So I'm representing government money, and I once visited Berlin, and their advice was from a person similar to yourself was never ever take government money because it's just slow, lots of reporting, and just a drag. So what's your perspective on accepting or aggressively looking for public funding or going at it for real with private stuff?
Can I get that go away and use more of this stuff?
I'll bring it to have here.
Okay, over here. Right. But he can't see it from there. Right. So what I think about government money is that it has its place. Okay. One of the problems we have in Sweden, or the great advantages we have in Sweden, is what's known as a welfare state. Okay, which means that people who want to start a startup, if it fails, they will still get their diabetes taken care of. If it fails, their kids will still get schooling. If it fails, they probably will still be able to stay in the same house, even, and definitely in the same school district. This is enormous. You have no idea how big this is. I started one of my first ones, which isn't there, when I was on maternity leave, and my kids slept during the day sometimes, and therefore I could start a company, obviously. And just the money from that made it possible. Okay, so to start there, the welfare state is huge, and that's government money. That's all of our taxes supporting each other. The next thing is incubators. Incubators are fantastic. Okay, it maybe is important to tell you that my daughter is doing an IT startup called Volumental. Honestly, I could have funded her. My husband and I could have funded her. My husband is a pricing expert, and I'm pretty good at starting companies. We could have helped her, right? We have enough money. We have enough companies. We could have done this. What did we do? We say, go to Sting and try your darndest to get into Sting, because it really will help you. Okay, so that has to be a good recommendation. If I send my kid there, it's good enough for you too. Okay. Next thing is then money that goes directly to the projects. Now, since our old age pensions are generally paid for, since our kids' education is paid for, and since we don't have to pay much when we get very sick, there isn't much reason for us to save large amounts of money here in Sweden, which means that most of us cannot spend a year or two without a salary. Most of us can't spend a month without a salary, right? So what ALMI does, so you have first welfare state, you have incubators, and then you have ALMI, and they have a sort of a spread of different kinds of money you can get, and a lot of it's basically for free if the project doesn't turn out. That is extraordinarily important. You can get 15,000 or something to get somebody to do a market research. You can get 300,000 to get going a bit. You can, and then they will do matching money with people like me so that you don't have to get diluted as much. Right? If I buy some shares in your company, you have less. You have a smaller share of your company. I have a bigger share. If you can get government money in, then you're stronger in your negotiation. That's very good. And then after that, you have, for research-based projects, there's something called Vinnova, usually. You can get quite a bit of money out of that. It's all ways to get money without giving up ownership of your company too early, and I think all that's great. I just invested in a company just where my money was matched against European something or other, European whatever, AEF, European Investment Fund money, and I thought that was great because they got 10 million from European Investment Fund, but in order to get that, they need to get 10 million from private people, and I thought that, it seems to work just fine. So I would say that in general, fine, go ahead, especially these things, which are ways to spread the opportunity of starting companies a little wider. Otherwise, it's only the rich ones that can do it. I don't think that's okay. Social mobility, yes. Anything else?
Okay, I
There's
think
one over there. One more.
Okay, I take a short run here. This is the final question. Yeah, Dag.
Hello. Thank you for a great talk. I'm Dag Forsen from SICS, Swedish ICT. And I have a question with regards to SMEs and public procurement. As you know, we have a public health system, and a lot of the services and stuff sold in Sweden are using public procurement. And I'm also working with a growth project in Stockholm here called Stockholm Digital Health. And the idea is to create a lot of new tech jobs in that sector, in the health sector.
I think Daria and I
but
should go
I saw when I saw this, I forgot about this Porter's 5 forces. I saw it it's like 20 years old, right? But I think it's so applicable when talking about the situation we have for the SMEs. We have very few limited number of players, almost a monopoly in many cases, and it's very hard for them to have to be able to compete. It takes a very long time for them to participate in these procurements, and it's also hard for them. Do you have any tips for SMEs that would like to go into this business? I don't know if you have experience from it, but I think it's an unfair situation.
I did two of these, right? I did Ellen, and I did Toby, which sent to handicap, ALS sufferers. Actually, I had a talk something like this for Karolinska a few days ago, and it was basically the same slides, but okay, so what's the problem with life science? What are the general problems in life science? Daria and I are both part of an organization called the Innovation Council, and one of the things that Daria is pushing, I would say, is digital health. You might have heard her during her talk, a little bit, digitalization, digital health, getting open data there, okay? And one of the things that I'm pushing is more access for SMEs into the procurement process. There's a guy there named Charles Edqvist who's interested in redoing the public procurement process. And there it looks like the law is changing to do a little bit more innovation procurement, something like that. So we're trying, okay, to make it easier, but it's a hell of a problem because those SMEs have got too few, too strong customers. Plus, there's a big problem in that the person who actually needs something and is willing to pay for it is often not the one who needs something is not the one paying for it, okay? So that when I was doing Toby, right, so Toby knows where you're looking on a screen. If you look for long enough, it can be click. That means you can steer a computer with your eyes. When do you need this? When you're about to die with motor neuron disease or you have bad cerebral palsy. Motor neuron disease is one of these things you really hope you don't get. It's about 5 years between disease and death on general. Stephen Hawkins has survived a lot longer. Sometimes it's only a few months. Okay. You would think that it doesn't happen very often. It's catastrophic. It's one of these nightmare things. You would think that the insurance companies would pay for these immediately. but they don't. 3 times when I was doing that for Toby, my American employees ended up after the funeral with that thing because the insurance companies just wouldn't pay and delayed. So it's miserable and it's tough. And what I can do, if you give me your card, I will send you the slides that I did for Karolinska, but it's not easy, okay? It's not. I think that was it. I didn't have any more time, right?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jane. Thank you very much. So, our next speaker is Jason Hoffman from Ericsson, also a person with a lot of energy, a very interesting background. You will get one. This is broken, so I will talk and you will get the equipment. Jason has a very interesting background, I would say. Now he's heading Ericsson's cloud operations, and but he has also started a lot of companies. He has been an investor or is an investor, so you have a lot of perspective. And now you will talk about cloud and internet, what is happening and what will be the business in the future. So I'm very happy to have you here, and the floor is yours. I think we are almost there now. Yeah. So if we
can raise the screen up as well.
Yeah.
That's sort of oh, you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Perfect. That's that may not be a joke for everybody, but that's Verizon's commercials in America. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yeah. So thank you very much. I mean, this is exciting. I mean, I was told it was going to be in a lecture hall. I haven't been in a lecture hall in a while. So I thought I wouldn't show slides. I'm actually going to use a little bit of the board as I need it, because back, for example, when I was teaching at UCLA, we didn't really have computers or PowerPoint. We used chalk and foils in that, so it actually feels a little weird to use a computer in a lecture hall for me. But no, as we said, I mean, I've been with Ericsson for 2 years now. You know, the idea was to come and help with a few things while simultaneously, hopefully, retiring to delightful Sweden, actually. So, because I still have 3 daughters from 15 on down. It's by the way, a fantastic place to raise a family. So, came to Ericsson a little over 2 years ago to start helping with what it meant for Ericsson to go into infrastructure more broadly. The company, of course, as you know, does design, build, operate, and support mobile network infrastructure for mobile network operators, and that's largely the activity. The idea here was maybe we could do infrastructure, and is there even sort of a reason why? Is there an eraser somewhere? Right. This? Oh, camouflage. So we'll talk about 3 areas. The first one is at least what I think the next 20 years is going to be from an infrastructure standpoint. The short version is it's like the last 20 years, but a little in reverse. So it's not rocket science for how we figure that out. But we'll talk about you know, the next 20 years. The second area is then really the mere phenomena that's happening to this digital transformation we talk about very much. And that is that type of transformation and the needs of the next 20 years from an infrastructure standpoint means that we have to start taking a industrialized approach to infrastructure like we never have before. As you know, we're already getting to the point where data centers are taking up almost double-digit % of our total energy consumption globally. And the number one thing stored in them right now is selfies. That's That's what's in it. We occasionally refer to them as global repositories of human knowledge, but number one is selfies. Do you want to take a wild guess on number two? That's number three. That's number three. Yeah, the cat thing's funny because Eric Nakagawa that started that actually, oddly enough, was a good friend of mine back then, and I thought it was the stupidest thing he ever did. Because the one funny thing about, so I'm from San Francisco. The one funny thing about being from San Francisco is it's only the town's actually a little bit smaller than Stockholm. There's only about 800,000 of us in town, and there's only 2.5, 3 million in the whole Bay Area. So it's also that might be rude if I say that, but it's also somewhat inbred in the sense of lo and behold, your neighbor all of a sudden is going to work in a jet. But this industrialization part, and then the third area is really sort of the enablers of that, because whether we realize it or not, we are a bit in a hardware renaissance, and that's whether we're making our own things and doing this to a wide range of different types of chips available. The idea that Raspberry Pis aren't a quote-unquote toy, these types of things. And even though we like to say things like software is eating the world and hardware is a commodity, and we sort of do this, we do go through these continuous types of cycles where software hits a certain limit and then hardware has to innovate, and then software builds on that and hardware has to innovate. And that does interplay a bit with the industrialization aspect as well, because we have to resist the urge to continuously add to things. Right? So these three areas. So the first one is, I started out my career, I guess, in computing, in scientific computing. And if you go back then, scientists and accountants who were the people that largely used computers 20, 30 years ago. We used them as big calculators, effectively. And particularly in scientific computing, you always had this discipline that you had to make the best calculator for the cheapest price because you're typically sitting on a capped grant. You get $78 million to build a supercomputer, and you wanted to do the most you could possibly do. And so we're gonna sort of park that as a little bit of a principle, because that principle never showed up in enterprise IT, for example. Right? That it's like whatever, $100 million ERP system, whatever type thinking. But it's the scientific computing thinking that's shown back up again, right? So we started out there, and then we had the web show up, roughly 1995 or so, and we had a number of little sort of web servers sitting there, and it wasn't complicated. We're talking about the consumption of documents. I mean, like reading things. And then it became somewhat bidirectional, where we wanted to at least comment on the things that we were reading. We even wanted to say annotate them. Occasionally, we even wanted to talk about it, and we didn't want to go to a new phone. I mean, we wanted to just use the computer to do that. But the reality being that off over here, oops, I'm misspelling humans. That's disconcerting. We have humans talking, messaging, and then consuming media. And I mean that broadly, the watching of a video, the reading of a PDF, the looking of a PowerPoint. Those are our workloads. It's talking to one another, it's messaging one another, and it's the consumption of media. And we've seen, for example, that we talk about the same. We've started messaging a lot to one another because we broadly message to people, but we only like to talk to people we like. And then we're consuming media at unprecedented amounts now. And there was really actually only one industry that was disrupted by this, and that was advertising. So every model that basically showed up here is advertising. We do have some people that still did direct pay. You directly pay Netflix to not have to read ads, but everyone else is advertising in that. And there were a number of people that basically built platforms, and largely the platform players have won this. And when I say a platform, I mean somebody buys something from you, you give away something for free, and you get people paid, and if you manage to do all three of things, you have a platform business. So Google is free search, people pay for AdWords, people get paid through AdSense. Facebook is free, people pay for ads, people get paid through the Facebook API, you know, and so on like that. Yeah, and under the direct pay, you know, by the way, I include retail. And so we see these types of things where the idea that we give away something for free and we get people paid, these amplify what these people do. And so a lot of the players that have largely won in this space, they had amplifiers that other people didn't have. This idea that you just buy something. But we're starting in 1995. Little web servers starting to consume things. Now more people want to consume it. Tens of millions of people start showing up on this thing called the internet. And we have these human beings out here, and this is the best I can draw them. But I can make them smile. And we have here in the center, we have this type of thing where all of a sudden this entire mechanism really started by like a company called Akamai shows up to help distribute this content closer to the people, and it shows up in tens of thousands of locations. Now the 10,000-ish number is an interesting one, because if you looked at like standard, say, fiber connectivity, which we have now, but we didn't have then, but if you look at what you could do in the speed of light, every kilometer is about 5 microseconds of light moving. To be within a millisecond or 100 milliseconds of somebody, which is about what the human wants to see when you consume content. You know, it loads up in about a second. You need to be within 200 kilometers of somebody to do that. If you draw that as a circle and you draw a square inside of it and you fill out the area of that square, and then you tile the world with about 10,000 squares. Right? So it's about 10,000 squares, about 200 kilometers wide that it takes to cover the world. And then if you want to get down to like, you know, 100 milliseconds, then you need to be in the range of 10,000 to 100,000, you know, sort of sites. So it's really this type of idea that somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000, you know, you're within 100 milliseconds to 1 second from an eyeball. And so we see people like that, you know, basically begin to show up. And then all the middle mile guys start building out a ton of infrastructure. We had a massive broadband explosion and then collapse, 2001, 2002. And then when people like Amazon, I can't spell today, Microsoft, Google, decided to build their own CDNs for people reading materials like that, they built them very centralized. So around 2006 to 2008, as these guys were building it, they were, say, up to 100 sites. People get somewhat surprised when they learn that, you know, Google's just built their 13th, 14th, and 15th data center. There's only 15 of them. And even when you look at the own content distribution systems, we're talking about like 68 sites globally. So even though it responds great and you use it, and they're supposedly huge, less than 100 sites. And then we had mobile show up with the iPhone. Well, it's not quite fair to say it showed up with the iPhone, but it really sort of took off with the iPhone. And mobile application delivery required something that wasn't here and wasn't there. And then you had companies like EdgeCast show up in the middle that was in 1,000 sites type things. But you had this sort of thing. These humans wanted to consume voice media messaging. This had to show up. This had to show up. That had to show up. And that had to show up. Meaning edge, connect it all, centralized, middle, right? Now, the world that we're heading into now is not centered around humans. We've decided, for example, that perhaps in this type of thing, we have a new user. And so when we look at the new user of this, is machines. We call them sensors. We call them, the embedded little modules inside of cars, but that sort of thing. It's machines. We've decided that we've now can go out and instrument the world, and we can instrument humans, hopefully for the purpose of maybe these technologies doing something more than selfies, cats, and food, right? That it can maybe do more in that. Now, the fascinating part about this is machines do not talk to one another. They don't text lol in that or send selfies, and they don't watch videos, and they don't click on ads, right? So what they do is you basically sit down and you do data collection. The idea that we collect data from the world in that. And then occasionally, not occasionally, but almost always, we want to do something with that data. And then the question is when you want to do it. Do you want to do it very quickly? Do you want to do it whenever? Do you sort of keep that going? If you want to do data very quickly, or you want to sort of loop back and change the behavior of the device, then you're now doing a control system. So we're at this funny point in time where humans aren't the end users, machines are the emerging end users. We've decided to collect data from the world. At some point in time, we look at that data, and if we say, hey, that device isn't behaving correctly, we should change the way it's behaving, and now we have a control system. So the three use cases before, voice media messaging, now become control systems and data collection. So there are only two, and people call it machine-to-machine or IoT or connected cars or sort of whatever you want, but we have a chip somewhere where some event data gets generated, we collect it, we keep it as a time series, and we analyze it. And sometimes we go back and tell the device, do something different, right? So we have there. Now, the funny part is, what industry does this disrupt? We don't make new industries, right? We don't make new industries. Advertising existed before Google, it existed, still exists today, and so on like that. We as humans, we're pretty sort of like straightforward in there. Now, none of us are really sure. The closest thing we can get is maybe it disrupts something like insurance. It's already touching supply chain, transportation, logistic industries quite a bit. However, when you look, supply chain, logistics, distribution really took off, meaning we got rid of people like longshoremen packing up boats when the containers showed up, the pallet showed up, the container ship showed up. But most importantly, when the certainty of your ability to deliver something could be insured, right? But right now, nothing in the IT space is insured. If you went off, for example, to somebody like Lloyd's and said, hey, how much would it cost for me to get, like, I don't know, a $4 billion cyber liability policy for my enterprise, the usual response is that it would cost about $6.5 billion to get a $4 billion insurance policy in there. So what the insurance industry is actually telling us is that they think that we have a 100% likelihood as an enterprise over a decade of having a event of significant liability that they can't make their 6 to 15 points on that. No, thank you. Right? So the only thing maybe is basically like insurance, but the platforms that show up, who knows what those are. Now, the funny part is if we think of this again as a mirror, where now we have, I don't know how to draw a picture of a machine. I mean, maybe a square human, so it looks like a robot, like that. But we have machines, and right now, most of these machines are going off and sending their data to someone like Amazon Web Services. People that are out there playing around in the IoT space and doing some data collection are prototyping those a lot on very centralized types of infrastructure, right? Yet the funny part about this is when you look at some of these types of data collection ones like that, there are single data collection use cases, data collection use cases that are larger than the traffic of something like a Netflix. What happens when there's 1,000 of them? Right now, the entire infrastructure we've built handles a Netflix and a Google, YouTube. Like that's all it handles. We sit in some markets. You have extreme examples like the Netherlands where something like 80 to 90% of mobile traffic is Netflix. You head into some parts like the United States where 70 to 80% of traffic in the evenings is Netflix. And that's of capacity. So we have this thing coming where these are very centralized. It's unclear what the business model is going to be to build out this capacity. Yeah, 5 minutes? Yep. Oh, okay, all right. It's also sort of unclear that one's going to go and do what's next. And then it's also unclear who's going to go and do what's next. Right? Now I'm only on topic number 1, so we can hit these topic number 1. It's a front-loaded talk. I mean, so the key around the industrialization aspect is you start looking at these lessons from the Googles and Facebooks and so on of the world, scientific computing, of how do you begin to start building an infrastructure where your fundamental offering is free, right? So it means that in an industrialized infrastructure approach, continuously improving unit economics of that infrastructure is the driver. The ability that every 2 years you can make it cheaper, 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 cheaper. It should not be surprising to any of us that somebody like Amazon, an expert in supply chain, distribution, warehousing, understanding why people buy, could offer a virtual machine in 2009, and then 4 years later offer it for 80% cheaper. And yet when they reported their numbers, they were still very profitable on that VM. Because in that same period of time that most of us keep a server, they took 96% of the cost out of delivering that virtual machine. Supply chain thinking. So, when we look at the enablers of this type of thing, we're heading into a thing now where chips are, yes, a quote-unquote commodity, but the first one is the default chip you'll see out there in the near future. The majority of them that will be shipped will be custom. So you have a custom foundry effort going on. Even Intel's business around custom foundries exploding. So the ability to get a little chip for the exact right price that just does exactly what you need, that's happening. Silicon photonics in the data center, big area. The ability to start going 100, 400, 800 gig, 1 terabit per second, stay in the same little form factor, keep the cost of that the same. Silicon photonics, big one. Okay? And then when we start looking at this from a software perspective, the thing that's incumbent on all of us as software engineers is not the action of putting more things in, but the act of taking things out. So when we look at even the sort of popular rise of containers and things like that, it's about taking things out. It's not an operating system on an operating system with the full VM, with the full sort of layers. A lot of the activities that we're seeing is minimizing sort of like all the way down. And we started doing this like previous team I ran was we did like a semi-popular runtime called Node.js that a lot of people use. And that's a great example. And then another sort of like little sort of small messaging core where when you would take something like a full-blown messaging engine and something like Java, you'd be looking at about a 1 gigabyte sized application, about a 0.5 gigabyte sized messaging bus. And we're sort of back to, how I remember it when I was younger. This idea that it's okay to make an application that's a megabyte in size, and it's okay to make a messaging system that's a megabyte in size, because with this explosion, we're going to have to get much more efficient. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I guess we have some questions now. Questions?
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. All right.
It's okay.
Yes. Hi. Nicolas Sevier, actually work in Ericsson. But, yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. We've met once. But,
yeah.
How is it that it's so difficult to explain this change in the industry in terms of minimization and the change to more machines? Why is it so? Why so many people are resisting this idea that you need to go towards things that are much simpler, more efficient, and more distributed, and move forward with that, and stop resisting it and just that's what's going to happen. What's happening now? And
now, I mean, for me, it comes down a bit to. Just how we are as humans. So you're more likely to find a human that's what we would call a pack rat, right? People don't tend to throw many things away every year and so on like that. So as humans, just as I think our basic biological makeup, we're pack rats. And we don't always like to clean up, and we don't always like to finish our dinner, and we don't like paying off debt, and we don't like taking out the garbage, and so on. And we have technical debt. We even build garbage collectors and runtimes. We do these types of things. And so this idea of taking almost an overall design philosophy of minimizing, simplifying, and still getting to something that has a certain degree of elegance. That not only is a rare trait in the furniture industry, it's also a rare trait in computer science, and you have to decide to do it on purpose because we're just sort of the most advanced primate on the planet, but we're still largely running around consuming fruits and pooping where we want and sleeping when we want to, and we have to work at it. So I think there's a little bit of a basic type of aspect there. The other one is that it's very difficult for people to understand distributed systems without working on them. Meaning working on them just in that. This idea that what is it like to have everybody in the world as a friend on Facebook is a distributed type idea. So meaning we tend to even think of centralized systems versus decentralized systems versus distributed systems without sort of understanding that the distributed system is a superset. That if you build a proper distributed system, the other ones you can basically apply a policy to it and the other behaviors fall out. Now when we look at the creation of these types of systems, they're very difficult to create from the beginning. The fact is when you're sitting there and writing software, it's much easier to understand a completely monolithic application. It's much easier to correct your errors in it. It's much easier to correct your mistakes. And so we go and we make a monolith. And unless there's operational pressure applied to it where stuff breaks, then we basically don't start breaking it apart and we don't start doing it. So I think it really comes down to the fact that many of us are messy pack rats. And you have to be sort of the type of person that, you know, has like a section of your home where one of your goals is to make the old hardwood floor just perfectly flat and perfectly smooth and have the grain pop up. And you have to have that type of mentality, even though you're sort of working with software. And we do actually have to work at understanding what it means to create something that's distributed from the beginning and good. And I think it goes against just sort of what we're comfortable with. Yeah, even though it's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you very much, and please stay here. And I would ask Jane coming to the floor. I would ask Daria and Susanne also coming.
Oh, we have more.
Yeah, we have more.
Yeah, oh, we'll do. Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yeah, well, nice to meet you.
Yeah, and so now you have the chance to ask questions to these people with all their brilliance, their energy, their fastness, the competitiveness. Also, we have seen this before lunch here. It was extreme. We had a competition here also during one of the talks. So, questions, please. I know. There must be some. You see someone? What? Yep.
This is a little unspecific, but sort of a big bomb hit yesterday or 2 days ago with Daniel Ek's letter. And I was wondering if you guys have any comments about the startup situation in Stockholm, you know, and...
Yeah, there's a big problem in that we don't have enough places for people to live, okay? So you actually can't recruit people because they can't find a decent place to live, okay? That's huge, we can't do it, okay? And we have a lot of land here. Stockholm is not overcrowded. We could do this, but we're not. And this is very frustrating because we're going to lose. Right now, we're number 2 in the world, Silicon Valley, for startup, okay?
Also a hard place to find.
Yeah, it is, but it's possible, and here sometimes it's absolutely impossible. So I find that very frustrating. Another thing that's very frustrating that is the options programs. We thought we were going to get good options programs. I mean, we really did think so. And what did we get? Not a good options program suggestion. I think that we've been bloody enough about the criticisms that it's probably going to get edited, but those two things are absolutely key, and without them we will lose. So yeah, Spotify is going to move. That's what, 2,500 people with good jobs moving out of Stockholm to I don't know where, but someplace where they have housing and a decent tax system for options. Seb at Klarna had a good thing. A while back there was something called löntagarfonder where the employees would take over ownership of the big companies, right? Remember that? Maybe you're all too young, but there was a big deal about that, and it was really what was going to happen until the other half of Sweden said, no way, we're not going to have socialism. Well, what is options program other than trying to give away bits of the company to the employees? And the leftish government doesn't want to do that. I find it very frustrating. There you go.
And I can only chip in because one thing I think is just what's obvious is that what's good for startups is what everybody needs. We need housing, period. We need skilled people, period. That's not specifically for startups. When it comes to the personal options, I also find it very weird. What's kind of different about at least digital startups is that typically you can build really great a lot of value with very few people. Now the entire model in the system we used to have is that the big values built by companies is shared and distributed to many through employment. Now you don't need a lot of employees to create this huge value. So basically personal options is a way to distribute value, and it's really weird for me how that can be such a controversial thing.
Well, I mean, I don't think he's going to move, to be honest. I mean, because move where? I mean, and again, you have to remember, San Francisco native done a lot in San Francisco. You know, move somewhere like San Francisco. San Francisco is worse, and much worse. And we forget a couple things. As somebody is, you know, the fully loaded tax rate. You know, if you're not within the normal capital gains range, meaning you haven't actually exercised that option, filed the proper paperwork, and then had that option for more than 3 years, the tax bracket on that option in California is 56%. So it's not better, you know, from that. In fact, it's an issue. So there tends to be things around where you decide you're going to gate something becoming a long-term share or not, and when you're going to sort of go and do that. California is not perfect either in there. You know, you're looking at, you know, 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartments inside of San Francisco as being, you know, things that are, you know, roughly 110,000 SEK, you know, as far as rent, you know. So, and I think when you look at even startups like Spotify and a number of startups in the Stockholm area, you cannot discount the fact that, you know, it's likely companies like that have been hiring all of the machine learning PhDs out of KTH. You know, it started in doing like this. There's an exceptionally vibrant university system here, just like there is in sort of the Bay Area, just like there is in the Boston area and so on like that. There isn't another, you know, place that's captive where one can basically pop in and be the most interesting place to sort of go. And so I think it's more likely that somebody here blinks than they move, but that's me.
And can I just say, that's why this is not really a startup-specific thing. We all need these things, so we can just agree on needing housing and skilled people regardless.
We forget, Ericsson moved their headquarters to St. James in London for 2 years, and then it's back. So, you know.
Do you expect there will be more remote work because of the housing issues?
Yeah. Man.
Do you expect there might be, there's always a lot of talk about remote work and whether there will be more of it in the future, whether people will be working more remotely now that all of this video technology is available. At the same time, there's a flip side of it about how cities are really drivers of innovation. So do you think there's going to be a shift happening? And incidentally, I lived for 4 years in California, and everyone over there right now is saying that it's impossible to hire qualified people too in the San Francisco area.
Yeah. You have to have a great, and that's the thing. You have to have sort of a great story. I mean, the remote work. It's very difficult to be a remote workers first. You know, you have someone who's not used to working remote. Now they sort of work remote. I mean, so. It's nice if they've been working remote and sort of other things, and you're not their first time. It also depends on the job, and then you do have to mix with sort of remote or not. I mean, I think the housing issue here should be more solvable. I mean, you know, you know, I sold my house in San Francisco, and the relative equivalent here is it's gigantic. You know, and you sort of look at the thing, and there's plenty of space just, you know, right there. I mean, somewhere like San Francisco, you're entirely covered by water. I mean, there's only 14 kilometers by 14 kilometers of land, and then this peninsula that heads into a desert. So there's not a ton to do there. And then if you head north, it's protected as well. I mean, there's more cows in Marin County than there are people, and that's on purpose. So, you know, it should be solvable. I mean.
Yeah.
One thing about remote working, this Tekla that I just sold, we were remote. I was here mostly, and then the company was in Zurich because the founder wanted in Zurich because he likes to bicycle up mountains. Okay?
Yeah.
and Zurich is a place one can move, but it's even more expensive than here.
Yeah.
But they do have housing, just expensive housing. But there, what we did was we basically said there's a high tide where everybody comes into the office for 2.5 days a week. We come like Monday late morning and leave Friday after lunch. And we were in the office and we ate all our meals together and we fought and we discussed and we became a group there because group dynamics do require that, you know. And, but then we could split out and do everything else. Then I think that is a decent way of working. It's not very sustainable, but.
Susanne?
Just a small comment. I mean, it's really complicated to have housing in Stockholm, but it's also possible to have really great startups in the whole Sweden. So, I mean, we have space in Sweden, and it's also possible to work outside Stockholm with startups really successfully with a built-up infrastructure and so on. Västerås is a really good place.
Okay, Linnea, shall we provide some small flowers? So, thank you very much. Fantastic. And we... Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, I think we have a conclusion. Build more houses in Västerås and in Stockholm. And now it's time to get some food and the exhibition starts. So thank you very much and a big applaud for all of you.